The derelict ship hung in space like a corpse. Ji-hoon Park stared at it through the viewport of his salvage vessel, watching the ancient hull rotate slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. The metal was dark, pitted with micrometeorite impacts, and covered in a thin layer of cosmic dust that sparkled in the light of the nearby sun. "That's a big one," Myray said from behind him. His sister leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Think it's worth the fuel we burn getting here?" Ji-hoon shrugged. "The scanner says it's still got power somewhere inside. Even if it's just backup batteries, we can strip those and sell them. Alien tech always fetches good prices." Doyeon, their pilot, called out from the cockpit. "I'm bringing us in close. No signs of life. No radiation leaks. Looks safe enough." Safe enough. That was the best they could hope for in this line of work. Ji-hoon had been salvaging derelict ships for 5 years now, ever since the colony on Mars went bankrupt and he needed a way to pay off his family's debts. Most days it was boring work. Cut through a door, catalog what was inside, haul out anything valuable, and move on to the next wreck. But sometimes, just sometimes, you found something interesting. The airlock cycled open with a hiss. Ji-hoon stepped through first, his boots magnetic against the metal floor. The gravity inside was still working, which was unusual for a dead ship. His helmet light cut through the darkness, revealing a corridor that stretched ahead into shadow. "Power's still running," he said into his comm. "Gravity, life support systems, maybe even computers. This thing isn't as dead as it looks." Myray followed him inside, her scanner beeping softly as it mapped the interior. "The design is old. Really old. I'm seeing architecture patterns that match the Valanth Empire. You know, the ones that collapsed about 300 years ago." Ji-hoon knew. Everyone knew. The Valanth had ruled a huge chunk of the galaxy for thousands of years before their empire tore itself apart in a civil war. Now their territory was divided among dozens of smaller kingdoms and trading federations. Most of their ships had been destroyed or salvaged long ago. Finding one intact was rare. They moved deeper into the ship, passing through corridors lined with alien script. Ji-hoon couldn't read it, but his translator pad could. It scanned the walls and displayed the words in simple Korean. "Detention block, prisoner transport, high security, a prison ship," Myray muttered. "Great, those are always fun." They found the first bodies in what looked like a mess hall. Dozens of them, alien creatures with 4 arms and scaled skin, slumped over tables or collapsed on the floor. They weren't decomposed. They looked frozen, preserved in some kind of stasis. Ji-hoon checked his scanner. "They're still alive, barely. Some kind of emergency suspension field. It must have activated when the ship lost main power." "Should we wake them?" Myray asked. "No. If this is a prison ship, these might be criminals. Let's just document it and move on." They explored for another hour, finding more frozen aliens, more empty corridors, more signs that this ship had been abandoned in a hurry. The logs they recovered told a story of betrayal. This ship had been carrying prisoners during the Civil War when the crew received orders to execute everyone aboard. Instead, the captain had refused and activated the emergency stasis systems, hoping to wait out the war. But the war had ended, and no one ever came back for them. At the heart of the ship, in what must have been the captain's quarters, they found something different. A single stasis pod, larger than the others, consuming massive amounts of power. The systems around it were still active, lights blinking in complex patterns. Ji-hoon approached carefully. The pod was made of some kind of transparent crystal, and through it he could see a figure inside. An alien, but different from the others. Taller, with smoother skin and 4 eyes instead of 2. She wore elaborate armor decorated with symbols that his translator identified as royal insignia. "This is someone important," he said. My ray checked the power readings. The pod is failing. It's been running for centuries on backup power, and it's almost empty. She'd die in a few hours if we don't do something. Ji-hoon stared at the frozen figure. He should leave. This wasn't his problem. They could take their salvage and go, and no one would ever know they'd been here. But he couldn't. He'd never been able to walk away from someone who needed help. Can we stabilize it? He asked. My ray studied the systems. Maybe, if we reroute power from our ship and bypass these damaged circuits. Yeah, I think so. But Ji-hoon, we don't know who this is. What if she's dangerous? She's dying. We can figure out the rest later. They worked for 2 hours, running cables from their ship, rerouting power systems, bypassing damaged components. Ji-hoon's hands were steady as he made the final connections. The pod hummed louder, the lights brightening. The power flow stabilized. Okay, he said. Now we can release her. He pressed the control panel. The pod hissed, and the crystal front slid open. Cold mist poured out, and the figure inside drew a sharp breath. Her 4 eyes opened, glowing faintly in the dim light. For a moment, she just stared at Ji-hoon. Then her eyes widened, and something like recognition passed across her face. Fear, wonder, and disbelief all mixed together. She stepped out of the pod, stumbling slightly. Then, to Ji-hoon's complete shock, she dropped to her knees. Her head lowered until her forehead touched the cold metal floor. What are you doing? Ji-hoon asked, taking a step back. The alien spoke, her voice rough from centuries of sleep. The translator in his helmet struggled with the ancient dialect, but finally produced words he could understand. Inheritor, forgive me. I did not think. I never believed I would see this day. I don't understand, Ji-hoon said. Please get up. You don't need to kneel. I am Harren, the alien said, still kneeling. Last Empress of the Valiant Empire. And you are from the third world. The prophecy spoke of you. I can feel it. You are the one who will restore what was broken. Ji-hoon looked at Mireille, who looked equally confused. I'm just a salvage engineer, he said. I think you're confused. No, Harren said, finally raising her head. No confusion. I have waited 300 years for this moment. The moment a human would come. The word hung in the air between them. Human. She knew what he was. But how? And why did she look at him like he was something holy? Ji-hoon had come looking for salvage. Instead, he'd found an empress who thought he was destined to save her empire. This was going to be complicated. Harren refused to stand until Ji-hoon ordered her to. He felt ridiculous giving commands to an empress, but she insisted. When he finally told her to get up, she rose smoothly and looked at him with those 4 eyes, each one reflecting his image back at him. They brought her aboard the Second Chance, Ji-hoon's salvage ship. She moved carefully, as if her body was remembering how to work after centuries of sleep. Dion kept his hand near his weapon the whole time, not trusting this strange alien who acted like Ji-hoon was some kind of god in the small common room. Harren sat across from the 3 humans and began to explain. My people have existed for 10,000 years, she said. We have ruled hundreds of star systems. We have seen civilizations rise and fall. We measure ourselves against ruins older than your entire species. Ji-hoon listened, trying to understand. The translator sometimes struggled with her words, making them sound formal and strange. Before we existed, Harren continued, there was another civilization. We call them the precursors. They built things that we still cannot understand. They created species, modified genetics, shaped entire worlds. Every intelligent race in this part of the galaxy was touched by them. Every race except one. She looked directly at Ji-hoon. Humans evolved naturally. No genetic engineering. No ancient intervention. You appeared on your world through pure chance and chaos. This makes you unique in the entire known galaxy. Myray frowned. So what? We're natural. Why does that matter? Because the precursors left behind texts, Heron said. Sacred writings that my people preserved. They spoke of their greatest failure. They created perfect species, but in doing so, they removed something essential. The spark of true randomness. The ability to create meaning where none exists. They became trapped by their own perfection. She leaned forward, her voice intense. The texts say that when the Empire faces its darkest hour, a being from the third world will appear. A natural intelligence, carrying the spark that the precursors lost. This being will see solutions where we see only predetermined outcomes. They will restore what was broken. That's just a story, Ji-hoon said. A prophecy. Those don't actually come true. I felt it, Heron insisted. The moment I saw you. Every Valant is taught to watch for this feeling. It is written into our oldest traditions. You are the inheritor. Dion laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is crazy. Ji-hoon is just an engineer. He fixes broken machines. He's not special. That is exactly what makes him special, Heron said quietly. He saw someone dying and chose to help, even though it made no logical sense. That is the spark. That is what my people have forgotten. The conversation went in circles for hours. Heron told them about the civil war that destroyed her empire. How her own generals had betrayed her, believing her too weak, too focused on peace instead of conquest. How they had imprisoned her rather than killing her, perhaps out of some last shred of loyalty. How 300 years had passed while she slept. Your empire is gone, Myray said gently. It's been divided up. There's nothing left to save. There are still Valant who remember, Heron said. Loyalists who never accepted the coup. If they knew I was alive, they would rally to me. But I need proof. I need the inheritor to stand beside me. I'm not doing that, Ji-hoon said firmly. I'm sorry about what happened to you. Really, I am. But I'm not interested in politics or empires or prophecies. We'll drop you off at the nearest station, and you can do whatever you want from there. Heron's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Disappointment, maybe. Or sadness. I understand, she said. You owe me nothing. I am grateful that you saved my life. They set course for Gyeongbok Station, a neutral trading hub on the edge of what used to be Valant space. It would take 3 days to get there. During that time, Heron kept to herself mostly, though Ji-hoon noticed her watching him work on the second day, while he was repairing a damaged power coupling. She approached him. May I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you save me? You said yourself it made no logical sense. You could have taken your salvage and left. Instead, you spent hours repairing my stasis pod, used your ship's power, took on a risk. Why? Ji-hoon didn't look up from his work. Because leaving you to die would have been wrong. Wrong according to whom? According to me. And where did you learn what is right and wrong? Ji-hoon paused, considering. I guess from experience. From seeing what happens when people only care about themselves. From understanding that we're all just trying to survive in a universe that doesn't care about us. We have to care about each other, or what's the point? Heron was quiet for a long moment. That, she said softly, is the spark. That ability to create meaning where the universe provides none. The precursors engineered purpose into every other species. But humans had to find it themselves. That doesn't make us special, Ji-hoon said. It just makes us human. Perhaps, Heron said. But perhaps that is special enough. That night, Doyeon picked up something on the scanner. Multiple ships moving fast, converging on their position. He woke Ji-hoon immediately. We've got company. At least 4 vessels military grade. They're broadcasting on Valiant frequencies. Ji-hoon rushed to the cockpit. On the screen, he could see the ships closing in. They were sleek and dangerous, bristling with weapons. Harren arrived a moment later. When she saw the ships, her face went pale. "They found me already." "How? Who are they?" Myra asked. "The Usurper Council. They rule the largest fragment of my old empire. If they know I'm alive, they'll want me dead. And they'll want you dead too, just for being with me." "Fantastic," Doyeon muttered. "Any suggestions?" "Run," Harren said. "Your ship is small, maybe fast enough to escape." But she was wrong. The military ships were faster. Within minutes, they had surrounded the second chance. A voice came over the comm, speaking in Valiant. The translator rendered it cold and precise. "Unknown vessel, you are carrying stolen property of the Empire. Surrender the prisoner Harren immediately, or be destroyed." Ji-hoon looked at Harren. She met his eyes, and he saw resignation there. She expected him to hand her over. It would be the logical thing to do. Save himself and his crew. But Ji-hoon had never been good at logic. "Tell them no," he said. Harren stared at him. "You'll die." "Maybe. But I didn't save you just to give you up to people who want to kill you. That would make saving you pointless." "That makes no sense," Harren whispered. "I know," Ji-hoon said. "But it's the right thing to do." And there it was again. That spark. Creating meaning in a meaningless universe. Choosing right over logical. It wasn't about destiny or prophecy. It was just about being human. The military ships opened fire. The first shot rocked the second chance, sending Ji-hoon sprawling against the wall. Alarms blared throughout the ship as shields struggled to absorb the impact. Diane fought with the controls, trying to maneuver away from the attacking vessels. "Shields at 60%, Mireille called out. "We can't take many more hits like that." Ji-hoon pulled himself back to his feet, his mind racing. 4 military ships against 1 small salvage vessel. No weapons worth mentioning. Shields that were meant to deflect debris, not weapons fire. They couldn't fight, and they couldn't run. But maybe they didn't need to do either. "Diane, take us toward that asteroid field," Ji-hoon said, pointing at the scanner. "Full speed." "That's a debris field from an old battle," Diane protested. "It's full of wrecked ships and unstable materials. We'll be torn apart. Or we'll have cover." "Do it." The second chance dove toward the field, the military ships following close behind. Another shot clipped their rear, and the ship shuddered. But then they were among the debris, weaving between chunks of twisted metal and frozen bodies. "They're still following," Mireille said. "Good. Harren, I need your help. Can you read Valiant military codes?" The Empress nodded, moving to the comm station. "What do you need?" "Those wrecks out there. Some of them still have active systems. I saw power signatures on the scanner. If you can access their distress beacons and trigger them all at once, it'll flood this area with signals. Their sensors won't know what's real." Harren's fingers moved quickly across the controls. "That might work, but it will only buy us minutes. Minutes is all I need." While Harren worked, Ji-hoon moved to the engineering station. He pulled up the power grid and started rerouting everything. Life support dropped to minimum. Gravity cut to 30%. Every spare bit of energy fed into the engines and the cloaking field that they'd never been able to afford to run properly. Harren triggered the beacons. Suddenly, hundreds of distress signals lit up the area, creating a wall of noise that would blind sensors. At the same moment, Ji-hoon activated the cloak and cut all external emissions. The second chance went dark and silent, drifting like just another piece of wreckage. "Don't move," Ji-hoon whispered. "Don't even breathe loud." Through the viewport, they could see the military ships sweeping through the field, searching. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the ships moved away, heading deeper into the field, convinced their prey had fled in another direction. When they were far enough away, Diane carefully powered up the engines and slipped out of the field in the opposite direction. They jumped to hyperspace the moment they were cleared in the crew quarters. Everyone collapsed. My ray was shaking slightly, the adrenaline wearing off. Diane just stared at the ceiling. Heron looked at Ji-hoon with something like wonder. "How did you think of that?" she asked. "I didn't really think," Ji-hoon admitted. "I just saw what was around us and used it. Old wrecks, active beacons, debris to hide in. It was all right there." "A Valanth commander would never have thought of that solution," Heron said. "We are taught standard tactics, engagement protocols, proper military procedure. You saw beyond all of that. I just saw a way to survive." "Exactly," Heron said quietly. "That is what my people have lost." Word of the escape spread quickly. In the fragmented territories of the old empire, information was currency, and the news that Empress Heron was alive became the most valuable information in the galaxy. 3 days later, when they limped into Gyeongbok Station for repairs, they found it transformed. The station was crowded with ships, all bearing different flags and insignias. Valanth vessels, human traders, and dozens of species Ji-hoon didn't recognize. Everyone had come to see if the rumors were true. The moment they docked, armed guards surrounded them. But these guards wore the old imperial colors, and they saluted Heron with reverence. "Empress," their leader said, kneeling. "General Hyunwoo sent us. He has waited 3 centuries for your return. He asked that you come to Fortress Daesung, where loyalist forces await your command." Heron glanced at Ji-hoon. "I must go. But you are free. You saved my life, and now you have saved it again. I release you from any obligation." Ji-hoon should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt uneasy. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. He looked at the guards, at the crowds gathering outside the dock, at the ships filling the station. "Who else knows you're here?" he asked. "Many people, I suspect," Heron said. "Why?" "Because if the loyalists found you, so did your enemies." He was right. An hour later, the station came under attack. Not from military ships this time, but from something worse. A criminal syndicate called the Collectors Guild, led by a woman named Soman, had decided that an Empress was worth more sold to the highest bidder than a Walls returned to her throne. The attack came without warning. Armed fighters poured into the station from hidden ships. The loyalist guards tried to hold them off, but they were outnumbered. Civilians screamed and ran. Ji-hoon found himself in the middle of chaos. "Get Heron to the ship," he shouted to Myray. "We need to leave now." But the dock was cut off. Fighters blocked the way, their weapons ready. Ji-hoon and his crew were trapped in the commercial section with dozens of panicking civilians and Heron. The Empress drew herself up, looking regal even in borrowed clothes. "I will not let innocents die for me. I will surrender." "No," Ji-hoon said. "There's another way." His mind worked frantically, taking in the environment. This was a commercial section. Shops, restaurants, storage areas. And above them, the station's atmospheric control systems. He'd worked on stations like this before. He knew how they were built. "Myray, can you hack into the station's environmental controls?" His sister understood immediately. "Give me 2 minutes." "You don't have 2 minutes," one of the fighters called out, moving closer. "Surrender the Empress or everyone dies." Ji-hoon stepped forward, hands raised. Okay. Just let the civilians go first. No deals." Ji-hoon kept talking, stalling, making up reasons for delay. Behind him, he heard Myray working frantically on her datapad. The fighters grew impatient, raising their weapons. "Time's up," their leader said. Now, Ji-hoon whispered. In my RA, he triggered the command. The atmospheric controls went haywire. Pressure doors slammed shut, dividing the commercial section into separate chambers. Then the air pressure in the fighter's chamber began to increase rapidly, while the pressure in Ji-hoon's chamber dropped. The fighters realized what was happening too late. The pressure differential created a violent wind. The door to the loading bay, weakened by the pressure, tore open. Everything not tied down got sucked out into space, including the fighters. It was brutal and terrible, and Ji-hoon hated that it had been necessary. But it worked. They ran for the ship while station security worked to restore order. As they prepared to launch, General Hyunwoo's fleet arrived, driving off the remaining attackers. The old general himself came to their dock, a massive Valanth warrior with scars covering his scaled skin. He knelt before Harren. "Empress, forgive my delay. Come with me to Daesong. There are many who wish to see the Empire restored." Harren looked at Ji-hoon. "Will you come?" "I don't think I'm useful in empire building," Ji-hoon said. "You saved us twice now using methods no Valanth would consider. You see solutions we cannot see. That is exactly what we need." Ji-hoon looked at Mireille and Doyeon. His sister shrugged. "We're already involved. Might as well see it through." So they followed General Hyunwoo's fleet to Daesong, a fortress world deep in loyalist territory. And with every jump through hyperspace, Ji-hoon felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders, whether he wanted it or not. The fleet appeared on the edge of the Daesong system 3 days later. Hundreds of warships, all bearing the colors of the Usurper Council. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons powered up, their shields gleaming in the light of the distant sun. On Daesong, the Loyalist forces scrambled to defend. But everyone knew the truth. They were outnumbered 3-1. The Usurper Council had newer ships, better weapons, and commanders who had been fighting for centuries. The Loyalists had passion and belief, but that might not be enough. Ji-hoon stood in the command center, watching the displays. Mireille was beside him, running calculations. Diane was with the fighter squadrons, preparing to launch. And Harren stood at the center of it all, looking at her fleet with sadness in her 4 eyes. "We cannot win this battle through strength," she said quietly. "Then, we don't fight with strength," Ji-hoon said. "We fight with everything else." He had spent the last 3 days studying Valanth military technology with fresh eyes. He saw things that the Valanth didn't see because they had always done things a certain way. Their ships were powerful but rigid. Their tactics were effective but predictable. Their systems were advanced but overly complex. He started making changes. Small ones at first, then bigger ones. He introduced network communication protocols that let ships coordinate without central command. He developed drone swarms that could adapt to enemy tactics. He added psychological warfare subroutines to their broadcasts. He simplified weapon systems to make them faster and more reliable. The Valanth engineers thought he was crazy, but General Hyunwoo supported him, and that was enough. When the enemy fleet arrived, they sent the expected message: "Surrender or die." Harren responded with the expected defiance. The battle began. The usurper ships moved in their perfect formations, firing in coordinated volleys. But the Loyalist ships didn't respond the way they expected. They scattered, moving independently, but somehow still working together. They released clouds of drones that swarmed like insects, too many to target efficiently. They broadcast messages filled with propaganda and truth, telling the enemy crews about the trials, about the inheritor, about a better future. Some enemy ships began to question their orders. The battle was brutal anyway. Ships exploded on both sides. Thousands died in the cold of space. Ji-hoon watched the displays with growing horror, seeing numbers that represented real people dropping to zero. This was the cost of leadership. This was what Harren had borne alone for so long. The tide was slowly turning in their favor when everything went wrong. The Usurper Council's flagship, a massive dreadnought commanded by Regent Nari herself, moved into position. Its main weapon, something called a World Breaker, began to charge. "They're targeting Daesang," Myre said, her voice shaking. "If they fire that thing, it will destroy the entire fortress. Everyone on the planet will die. Millions of people. All the civilians who had come to see Harren. All the loyalists who had waited centuries. All the children who didn't even understand what this war was about." General Hyunwoo's voice came over the comm. "We can't stop it. Our fleet is too far away. The weapon will fire in 3 minutes." Harren looked at Ji-hoon. In her eyes, he saw defeat. She had tried so hard, come so far, and it wasn't enough. The prophecy had been wrong. Or maybe it was right, but not even the Inheritor could stop this. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should never have asked you to stand beside me." Ji-hoon looked at the display, at the massive flagship charging its weapon, at his own small ship, the Second Chance, docked nearby. At Dion and his fighter, too far away to matter. An idea formed. It was stupid and dangerous, and would probably kill him, but it was the only option he could see. "I need a fast ship," he said. "The fastest you have." "Why?" Harren asked. "Because I'm going to stop that weapon." "That's suicide," Myre protested. "You can't get close enough. Their defenses will tear you apart. Not if I'm fast enough. And not if I'm too small to be worth targeting until it's too late." He ran for the hangar. Harren chased after him, grabbing his arm. "You don't have to do this. You've already done more than anyone could ask." "I know," Ji-hoon said, "but I started this by saving you. I'm not going to watch millions die because I didn't finish it." He climbed into a small fighter, the kind used for reconnaissance. It was fast, but had almost no weapons or shields. It was never meant for combat. Perfect. He launched before anyone could stop him, pushing the engine to maximum. The fighter shot across the battlefield, weaving between larger ships, too small and too fast for most weapons to track. The enemy flagship loomed ahead, enormous and terrible, its weapon glowing with building power. Ji-hoon armed the fighter's one significant feature, a fusion core that could be overloaded. It was a safety mechanism meant to prevent catastrophic failure, but if triggered deliberately at the right moment, it would create an electromagnetic pulse. He flew straight at the flagship's weapon port. Defense systems finally noticed him and fired, but he was already too close. Bullets and energy beams filled the space around him. His shields, pathetic as they were, collapsed instantly. The fighter's hull started to tear apart. But he was close enough. He overloaded the fusion core and ejected, his escape pod shooting away at the last second. The fighter flew on for 3 more seconds before the core detonated. The electromagnetic pulse cascaded through the flagship systems. The World Breaker, its delicate firing mechanism disrupted at the critical moment, misfired. Energy meant to destroy a planet instead tore through the flagship itself. The massive ship buckled, explosions rippling through its hull. The enemy fleet, seeing their flagship crippled and their leader defeated, began to break apart. Some ships fled, others surrendered. The battle was over. Ji-hoon's escape pod was recovered by a loyalist cruiser. He was unconscious, badly injured, his body broken by the forces he'd endured, but alive. He woke 2 days later in a medical facility. Harren was sitting beside his bed, and when she saw his eyes open, she smiled. It was the first time he'd seen her truly smile. "The Empire is reuniting," she said softly. "Other factions heard about the battle, about the trials, about you. They're sending ambassadors. Peace is possible." "Good," Ji-hoon managed to say. His throat was dry, and everything hurt. "You saved millions of people," Harren said. "You saved everything. I just did what needed to be done." That is what makes you special. Later, when Ji-hoon could walk again, Heron asked him to come to the council chamber. He thought she wanted to discuss the peace negotiations. Instead, he found the room empty except for her. She stood in the center, looking regal in her imperial robes. Then, to his complete shock, she knelt. "What are you doing?" Ji-hoon asked. "The prophecy doesn't require this anymore. The trials are done." "This isn't for the prophecy," Heron said. "This is from me to you. Thank you for seeing me as someone worth saving. Thank you for standing beside me when you had no reason to. Thank you for believing things could be better." "Please get up," Ji-hoon said, embarrassed. "You're an empress." "And you are the person who reminded me what that should mean," Heron said, rising. "Now, I must offer you rewards. Land titles, a position in the new imperial court, whatever you wish." Ji-hoon laughed, then winced because laughing hurt. "I don't want any of that. I'm a salvage engineer. I like fixing broken things, not ruling them." "Then what do you want?" "I want you to keep your promise. Build an empire that's different. One that values mercy and creativity and protecting people. Make it worth all this." "I will try," Heron said. "With your help?" "I'm not staying," Ji-hoon said. "This is your empire to build, but I'll visit. I'll help when you need fresh eyes. I'll remind you to see things differently. That's all I can ask." As Ji-hoon prepared to leave Daesong with Myri and Doyen, word arrived from Earth. The human governments wanted to meet him. They wanted to know about the engineer who had changed the galaxy's political structure without meaning to. Ji-hoon groaned. "I'm never going to have a normal life again, am I?" Myri laughed. "You saved an empress and reunited an empire. Normal stopped being an option a long time ago." They boarded the Second Chance, their small salvage ship that had started all of this. As they lifted off, Ji-hoon looked back at the fortress world, at the fleets gathering for peace instead of war, at the beginning of something new. He wasn't special. He wasn't chosen. He hadn't wanted any of this. He had just been human, seeing someone who needed help and choosing to help them, seeing problems and finding solutions, seeing a broken empire and believing it could be better. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes being human was exactly what the galaxy needed. As the Second Chance jumped to hyperspace. Heading home, Ji-hoon allowed himself to hope that what they had started would last, that Heron would build something worth building, that all the death and sacrifice would mean something. He was just human, but humans were good at hoping, at creating meaning in a universe that provided none, at believing things could be better, even when logic said otherwise. That was the spark. That was what the precursors had lost and humans had found. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to change the galaxy. Fortress Daesong was enormous. A planet that had been turned into a military stronghold over thousands of years. Its surface covered with weapons platforms, shield generators, and massive defensive structures. Millions of Valanth lived here, all loyal to the old empire, all waiting for Heron's return. When their ship landed, thousands of people gathered to see her. They chanted her name, waving banners with the old imperial symbols. Heron stood at the top of the landing ramp, looking out at her people. And for the first time since Ji-hoon had met her, she looked truly like an empress. General Hyunwoo led them to a council chamber deep inside the fortress. Other Valanth commanders waited there, old warriors who had refused to accept the coup. But Ji-hoon noticed that not all of them looked happy to see Heron. "Empress," one of them said, a stern female officer named Nari, "we are glad you survived. But 300 years have passed. The empire is divided into 60 different factions. Why should any of them recognize your authority now?" "Because I never surrendered my throne," Heron said firmly. "May claim the throne," another commander, Taijin, said. "The Usurper Council has ruled for centuries. They have legitimacy through time and power. What do you have?" The prophecy, General Hyunwoo said. She has brought the inheritor. All eyes turned to Ji-hoon. He felt very small and very human under their four-eyed gazes. A human, Nari said dismissively. The prophecy is a legend. Old words written by people who are dust now. You expect us to follow ancient mysticism? The prophecy has always guided our people, Hyunwoo insisted. Enough, Heron said, her voice cutting through the argument. If my rule is questioned, then I will prove my right to lead. I claim the trial of unity. Silence fell over the chamber. Ji-hoon didn't understand the significance, but he could feel the weight of those words. Taijin leaned forward. The trial has not been invoked in 5,000 years. Are you certain? I am. Then it shall be witnessed, Nari said. But the prophecy states that the inheritor must stand beside you for the trial to be valid. Will this human accept? Everyone looked at Ji-hoon again. He had no idea what he was agreeing to, but he could see the need in Heron's eyes. She had no one else. I'll do it, he said. The trial of unity was not what Ji-hoon expected. It wasn't a single test, but 7 different challenges, each designed to prove whether someone could lead a civilization. They would be tested over the course of a week, with all of Daesung watching. The first trial was wisdom. They were brought to an ancient chamber filled with precursor artifacts. At its center was a puzzle that had stumped Valiant scholars for millennia. A cube of crystal that shifted and changed, covered in symbols that seemed to mean everything and nothing. Solve the puzzle, the trial master said. Prove you can understand what others cannot. Heron studied it for hours. She tried every combination of symbols she knew, every pattern from ancient texts. Nothing worked. She looked exhausted and frustrated. Ji-hoon watched her struggle, then approached the cube himself. He didn't know precursor languages or ancient histories, but he did know engineering. He studied the cube not as a mystical object, but as a machine. He noticed that certain symbols made clicking sounds when touched, that the cube was slightly warm in some areas and cool in others. He started pressing symbols, not in any meaningful order, but based on the sounds they made, creating a rhythm. The warm symbols, then the cool ones, then the warm ones again. Like tuning an engine. The cube suddenly lit up and opened, revealing a message inside. You approach truth not through knowledge, but through understanding of systems, the message said. This is wisdom. The Valiant watching murmured in amazement. Ji-hoon had solved in minutes what had taken their scholars centuries to attempt. The second trial was strength. They were brought to a massive door that led to a sealed chamber. Inside, sensors detected 1,000 civilians in danger from a failing life support system. The door was jammed, and it would take the system 10 minutes to override. Hold the door open while the evacuation proceeds, the trial master said. Prove your strength. The door was incredibly heavy, meant to seal against explosive decompression. Heron grabbed one side, and her powerful muscles strained against it. Ji-hoon grabbed the other side. He was only human. His strength was nothing compared to a Valiant. But he pulled anyway, gritting his teeth, refusing to let go even as his muscles screamed in protest. 3 minutes in, his arms were shaking. 5 minutes in, he felt something tear in his shoulder. 7 minutes in, he couldn't feel his hands anymore. But he didn't let go. Heron saw him struggling and moved to help him, taking more of the weight. They held it together, both suffering, both refusing to surrender. When the evacuation was complete and they finally released the door, Ji-hoon collapsed. Medical teams rushed to help him. Strength is not about being the strongest, the trial master said. It is about refusing to fail when others depend on you. The third trial was strategy. They were given a war simulation, a computer model of a battle they had to win with limited resources. Heron approached it like a traditional Valiant commander, following proper military doctrine. She lost the simulation 3 times. Ji-hoon took over. He ignored all the rules of proper warfare. He used guerrilla tactics, false retreats, psychological warfare. He sent messages to the enemy commander filled with lies and confusion. He attacked supply lines instead of military targets. He made the simulations, and I think he was in 3 places at once. He won. The Valanth judges were shocked. These tactics are dishonorable, one protested. But they work, Ji-hoon said. In real war, people die. Honor doesn't protect them. Victory does. The 4th trial was sacrifice. They were shown a scenario where they had to choose between saving a ship full of trained warriors or a ship full of civilians. Only one could be saved. Harren hesitated, torn between military necessity and compassion. Ji-hoon chose immediately. Save the civilians. The warriors are valuable, the trial master said. They've been trained for years. They serve the Empire. Warriors accept death as part of their duty, Ji-hoon said. Civilians don't. They deserve protection. That's what military strength is supposed to be for. His words resonated throughout the watching crowd. Many of the common Valant had suffered during the Empire's collapse. They understood being expendable. The 5th trial was vision. They had to describe what the Empire should become. Harren spoke of restored glory, of reuniting the scattered territories, of reclaiming lost honor. Ji-hoon spoke of something different. I don't know much about empires, he admitted. But I know that strength means nothing if people are miserable. I think the Empire should be a place where different species work together, where trade and art matter as much as military power, where protecting people is more important than controlling them, where everyone has a chance to be heard. The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, some began to applaud. Not the military leaders, but the common people who had come to watch. The 6th trial was mercy. They were brought before a captured enemy commander, one of the Usurper Council's officers. He had killed loyalists, burned their worlds, hunted Harren for years. Pass judgment, the trial master said. Harren looked at the commander with cold fury. Death, she said. No, Ji-hoon said. Offer him a choice. Join us or leave. But don't kill him. He deserves death, Harren said. Maybe, but killing him doesn't change anything. It just continues the cycle. Someone who loved him will want revenge on us, and it goes on forever. Offer mercy instead. The commander stared at Ji-hoon in disbelief. Then he knelt. I accept, he said quietly. I will follow the inheritor. The 7th and final trial was mystery. They were brought before an ancient precursor AI, still functioning after millions of years. It had been waiting here, watching empires rise and fall. I will ask one question, the AI said in a voice like stars dying. Why do you persist? Harren gave a complex answer about duty and honor and destiny. The AI turned to Ji-hoon. And you? Because giving up means nothing changes, Ji-hoon said. I believe things can be better. Maybe I'm wrong, but I have to try anyway. That's all any of us can do. The AI was silent for a long moment. Then, that is acceptable. You may pass. The trials were complete. The crowd erupted in cheers. Harren was proclaimed Empress of the restored Valanth Empire. And Ji-hoon, despite himself, was recognized as the inheritor. But their victory was short-lived. News arrived that the Usurper Council was assembling a massive fleet. They would come to destroy Desong, and everyone on it. War was coming.